I am an independent ordained Christian minister.
I'm a field investigator for the Southern California chapter of MUFON International.
I believe I'm ready, but could you just explain to me what it is we're actually going to be doing here?
The revelation that's coming forth in a very official way that ET is real, it's called non-human intelligence officially. How does that change someone's spiritual or religious beliefs?
The following program is presented for general information, education and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be advice of any kind. The content, views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals involved. The use of information on this program is at the user's own discretion.
Hey Stuart, it's good to see you.
Mike, thank you. Great to see you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited. I'm excited that you're here with me and we're doing this. This is our first episode ever of Universal Disclosure, Meeting the Moment. Are you ready?
Thank you. I believe I'm ready, but could you just explain to me what it is we're actually going to be doing here? What's your vision for the show?
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to sort of further a discussion that I don't think is being had anywhere that should be being had, I guess. And the topic, I think for maybe the first season should be the spirituality and or religious aspects or implications of that and ET essentially. Like how does the revelation that's coming forth in a very official way that ET is real, it's called non-human intelligence officially, how does that change someone's spiritual or religious beliefs? That's kind of where I wanted to start off with this show.
Okay, well, I'm definitely interested in that. And that's something I've pondered a lot because I am an independent ordained Christian minister. So I've had time to think about these kind of implications of disclosure. And I'm really interested to see what other people think about it, how they feel about it, what their thoughts, expectations, and fears are. And without judgment, I've got a completely open mind about this. It might be useful for you to explain to the audience what your background is in this field.
That's actually a good point. But also, before I get to that, that's exactly why I wanted to do this with you, a reverend and ordained minister. I think it's a great combination. Myself, I'm a field investigator for the Southern California chapter of MUFON International. I'm also a section director. And I've investigated a lot of cases already, aside from my own personal research throughout my entire life. And it's sort of obvious to me what reality is. So I don't need anyone to try to persuade me one way or the other, nor am I here to persuade anybody else one way or the other. I just simply wanted to have a conversation of, this is real, now what? How does it affect or change you personally is sort of what it's about.
I think these are important questions, and they're questions for everyone at the moment, not just you and I. I find it interesting that you've been exploring these topics and actually acting as a field investigator. Now, from time to time, I want to ask you about this, but I won't ask you about specifics of cases, but I'd be very interested in themes. What themes are emerging? What motifs are emerging? What some contactees telling you?
Yeah, I'm happy to go into, sort of all kinds of things. Generally speaking, I can tell you that this isn't anything new. It's been happening for, as we know of, at a minimum for 70, 80 years. But really, if when you dig down into it, it's been happening for thousands. Since the beginning of time, basically, this has been happening. And it's just now becoming okay to even talk about it. But to that end, I don't think a lot of the folks in anywhere really know how to go about it because it's such a big topic that literally touches upon everything that all that is, all that we are, all that God is, all that spirituality, like everything. It affects everything. Sorry, I think I went off on a little tangent there, but what I was originally trying to say was it doesn't matter what age you are, what your background is, how intelligent you are, or how much money you make, or what color your skin is, what country you're in. People from all over the world have consistent sightings basically on a daily basis, and it's a reality. It's not a specific group of people or anything like that.
Well, I know that having had my own experiences, which at some point during the show we might get into, but I'm also surprised by when I open up about these topics, how others will candidly say, hey, you know what, Stu, I've had something happen too. I've never told anyone before, but I feel comfortable talking to you about it because you're a reverend or because you've opened up first. And I'm always very honored when that happens, but I'm also shocked by how frequently that happens.
Okay, so that's actually something I really want to get into. Maybe when we do our first official episode. I mean, this is our first official episode, right? But this is more of an introduction. But I wanted to delve into that with you in your community as a spiritual leader. How does that all sort of work? And that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Actually, was has anybody ever sort of approached you? I guess maybe you talked about it first, but. I've had similar things where if I say to somebody, I'm a field investigator, they more often than not will open up in some manner about the topic. And it's just like, but it's something that it's really hard even to breach that topic because you never know what, someone's reaction is going to be.
No, yeah, that's very interesting. Now, I'm also an artist. And this is how you and I initially met, because we're also musicians. And a beneficial thing for me, I've noticed, is because I'm an artist, if I'm talking about something that people think is a bit out there, they're very accepting of artists talking about crazy things because that's what we do. We explore weird topics. And there's a place for that. Like if I was a lawyer, if I was I don't know, a doctor, I might not be taught, or a pilot. And that brings us to an interesting topic about why pilots haven't spoken about these topics. I'd be reluctant to because my sanity would come into question. But now it's a lot broader, and pilots, even military officials, are opening up about these subjects now. Fascinating time.
Exactly, that's a really great point, which I probably should have said earlier too. Is with the various folks that I have talked to who have seen something that may or may not have actually been ET. They're from all backgrounds. I have interviewed current and former law enforcement military people, as well as lay people. And when I say lay people, that also incorporates like doctors and nurses, professional services people. Very, very credible people. So I don't need to be persuaded as to what reality is, as it were.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Now, so many people have had sightings and experiences, and it's very interesting to contemplate how many people came forward in the past and were dismissed or were quietened in some way, threatened, put into a psychiatric ward. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who ever said any crazy stuff in the past was true and believable, but I'm just exploring the fact that certainly some of them who were talking about these issues in the past were telling the truth.
Excuse me. Absolutely, yeah. There is. It's not even sure what I want to say about that because it's such a. It's a very personal topic as well.
Mm. Yeah, because it can tie in with your whole spiritual journey. You're breaking outside of the mold. And as artists, once again, I'll come back to that. We're used to that. We're used to pushing the boundaries of reality, of consensus reality and what's right and wrong. And there's a certain liberation in that, but there's also a certain danger in that. But I'm used to walking that path. So this feels completely natural to me to explore these issues.
And that is, also like when you and I were talking about, sort of what we want to do with this, you had brought up a really good and interesting point too, of speaking with contactees, not necessarily to tell their story per se, but to talk about how or why their spirituality changed after their experience or encounter. Because a lot of times, more often than not, people do have profound spiritual changes, and in some cases, other abilities might be sort of opened up to them. And I think that would be another interesting topic that isn't really being talked about too much.
That is an absolutely fascinating and broad topic, because we start bordering into initiatory rites of mystery schools and how some of these encounters parallel initiatory rites and the before and after effect. So there's a tangible difference with some of these contactees I'll talk about. And another thing I find very interesting is what the precursor was before the experience, what the contactee was talking about, what they were thinking about. In some instances, you'll ask them and they'll say, I was calling out to the universe to say, God, if you're there, show me a sign. That type of thing can happen immediately prior to some of these contact experiences, which I find absolutely fascinating. And that takes us right into the whole spiritual, not necessarily religious, but spiritual domain.
Absolutely. And there's definitely a difference, at least for me, and it sounds like for you too, between spirituality and religion. They're not necessarily the same thing, although they're very similar. And religion is rooted in spirituality, right? But I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say with that.
No, I've got an opinion on that, and some things I'm going to talk about are my personal opinions. I see religion as someone else's experience that we're trying to emulate. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, as an artist, we might try and copy another artist and use that as a template, and that's a great thing to get you started. But at some point, you've got to go on your own artistic journey or your own spiritual journey. But then you'll find in music the same thing happens in spirituality, where others will impose the rules on you. No, Mike, that's a blue note. That's a note from the blues. It's not exactly C. It's not exactly C sharp. That's a no. And you'll say in your musical journey, or I might, well, that sounds amazing. I'm going to pursue this whole blues journey, and you'll be shunned by a whole group of musicians. And I've experienced this sort of thing firsthand. Not pointing any fingers at anyone, because the genres are beautiful, just like some of the religions are beautiful, and they're keeping those teachings alive through the generations, but they can become a cage as well. Now, this brings me into this situation where someone will be a contactee, and I can name some examples right now, and they go back to their church or their community or their religious group, and they get shunned. Certainly initially, because the experiences they're coming back to report on are different and fall outside the bounds of what is accepted religiosity or acceptable communication with the divine. So therefore, well, it doesn't add up with our map here, so it's got to be evil. And this is how some religious people view this kind of thing. And equally, though, I would say it's important to maintain a degree of skepticism and not to just be open to everything, but to evaluate things with an open heart, I would say, is the most important.
Yeah, keeping an open mind and an open heart, I think, is very important with this conversation. And yeah, exactly what you said. There's about 8 different theories that are all very good theories of what this is, where it comes from, why it's here. Ultimately, we don't know. We're trying to figure that out. But the point is, one of those is that angels and demons are what these ETs or aliens really are. And it's like, I can sort of see why somebody might think that, but I don't think that that's really the case either. But again, that's just my opinion. And one of the things I think would be great for us to do, if we can, is to at some point, potentially soon, go out and speak with spiritual leaders in various denominations. I was raised as a Roman Catholic, so I don't know. I might start there, or maybe not. But talk to the various religious leaders and see, are they are they open to this, and how does ET sort of fit into their belief system? Because like the Vatican has come out a couple of times. I think it was like 2007, 2008. One of the astronomers said it was sort of okay to believe in ET. And in 2017, there was another statement that, sort of similar. Like, if you believe in ET, that's fine because God also created ET. And Pope Francis at one point said, "I will baptize aliens if they ask." So why are they making these statements? Why? It sounds like Christianity, at least, or Catholicism, is very much open to it. But I wonder about the other religions as well.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting that the Catholic Church appear to be taking this quite seriously, as if it's definitely a real phenomena. I'll be equally interested by any religious leaders who are completely dismissive of the topic, because I'll know that they haven't really explored it. Maybe they're afraid to. Maybe they just don't know how to explore it. And it'll be interesting to gently ask those questions of those leaders. Well, for example, what happens when this is undeniably a fact? Like, we're obviously on that path right now. How are you going to deal with it at that point? Or what preparatory moves are you making for that eventuality?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. And I would expect, really, I would be surprised if this didn't happen. If we start, or when we start reaching out to these various spiritual leaders, some of them are going to be open to the idea and some of them are not. But we are not wanting to slant this conversation in any specific way. From my perspective, it's more like a moderator of sorts, to have the conversation, not a debate, but a conversation. And there's going to be different viewpoints, and it's going to get uncomfortable for some people. That's the reality of it. But that's also how you grow, and looking at somebody else's perspective or point of view.
Yeah, I really like that. If we can stay respectful of each other's perspectives and fears, then I think that's important, because that's actually part of the spiritual journey, to be mindful of other people's situations and not making them have an increase in their fear, but just having an openness to be able to explore these topics. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I'm really excited about what we're going to do here.
Yeah, I am too. I think it's really great, and I can't wait. I can't wait to get started. I'm really happy that we're at this point now where we are sort of officially getting started. And I don't know. I think it would be kind of cool to let everybody out there know a couple of things about us as well. As you said, we've known each other for probably 10 or plus years. You and I have actually never met in person.
That's true.
You're in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm in Los Angeles, California, on the coast of Southern Cal. And we've been sort of working virtually years before that was ever a thing. And now we're sort of transcending through time and space with this. You're in a different season, in a different day, 15-hour time difference, and yet, we're essentially in the same room right now. I think it's pretty wild.
Very cool. It's also very interesting how we connected. So I might go into that very briefly.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
We met on a music forum, and I was making an instrumental track inspired by a crop circle, as I would. That's the kind of thing I would do. And at the time I was recording this track, an earthquake came through under my feet. I felt it move as I was working on this track.
Oh my gosh.
I listened to the track afterwards, and there was this weird noise on the track. And I posted on the forum, and I asked, what is this? Why did this turn up on my track? I didn't mention in the forum that it was a crop circle inspired track. I thought it was crazy enough that I was talking about it was crazy enough that I was talking about weird sounds during an earthquake. And Mike, you replied, and you had some interesting thoughts on that. I don't know whether you want to share that at this point.
I do remember that very much, and I don't know that I really want to go there at this point. And all I'll say is I will never ever listen to that recording again, for various reasons. But it was very, very interesting. But I don't really want. I don't want to sound cagey or anything, but whatever it was we were talking about, it was of a personal nature, I think. So, but nonetheless, that's okay. Is that really the first time? If that is legitimately what sort of brought us together, that is even more wild, I think.
Yes, that's what I was mindful of. So it's kind of these esoteric subjects. I think we knew each other on the forum because we would post music and others would critique it, which was super useful because there was a high standard of
Oh,
musicianship on that
absolutely, yeah.
website. I found it incredibly useful. And that's something I wanted critiqued for a different reason than normal. And Mike came forward
Here
and
I come.
talked.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that we related on that kind of weird level. And we stayed in touch. We've been in touch. And then I kind of went in my direction, and Mike's gone in his direction. And then we've come back together in this really interesting way.
Yeah, we certainly have, and it's again, it's I think right from the start, there was a spirituality aspect to, I guess you can call the connection that we have, and the things that we talked about right from the get go. And here we are, a long time later, and we're talking about even more interesting things, and I don't know, somehow hopefully helping other people in the process where maybe they don't have an outlet. And that's another thing too. I mean, obviously we need to probably build up some type of listener and or viewer. I don't know what the word is because I've never really done this
Participation,
before.
I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think at some point we should go live so we can have interaction with the people who are listening to this conversation, and perhaps we can put out a call as well if you're a spiritual leader out there who is interested in exploring this topic in a mature and respectful way. We definitely want to hear from you. We want to interact directly with you and ask you some very specific questions, perhaps.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating. And I'm aware of some interesting perspectives that some religions have on this topic, and they've informed my journey. So I've actually learnt from them. I know there's benefit to be had from those kind of conversations. And another thing I'd like to mention at this point is we're not coming from any place of judgment here. We're just trying to, by talking together, Mike and I are enriching our own journeys and learning from each other. And we're hoping to broaden that outlook and perspective into other people's lives where they can participate too on the journey. Okay, let's compare notes. What did you experience? What's happening here? Now, in the same way that, Mike, you'll be able to share perhaps some motifs or patterns of information, I'll be able to do the same from my experience of being a reverend. So I won't be able to mention specific names, but I'll be able to mention the type of things I've heard from people when they've opened up to me about these topics, some of the themes that have emerged. And it's going to be very interesting to see if there's similar themes that you've encountered with your discussions.
That's a great point. It's sort of just dawning on me now too. We are literally half a world apart, and we each have our own, I guess, little circles or whatever that we move around in. It's going to be interesting to compare notes for sure, because it's sort of, in my opinion, what I'm observing as someone who has researched this topic, for their lifetime, is we are truly in what I'm going to say is a controlled disclosure process that seems like it's going to be several years to go through, as it should be, and we could talk about that why it should be that way later on. But it's an international thing. Like the EU recently, just a couple of days ago, in March of 2024, had their own UAP hearing, as it were, after, in July 2023, the US had UAP hearing. So it's, and then of course we're talking about the Vatican statements and such too. So it's definitely, it's happening. And I think it's a way for people to sort of open themselves up to it, because it can be pretty shocking, perhaps, if you wake up one day and whether it's the United States or not, some nation state's leader gets on the TV and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is real. This is true." Then what, right? I mean, it's a lot to take in.
Okay, now the scope of this is so much bigger now because in the past, I would have a one-on-one conversation with someone who had had some weird experiences. And I would share my experiences with them and they'd share theirs with me. But that was as far as it went. Now this is like, instead of micro, it's like we're talking a macro level. And even I feel a little nervous sometimes about speaking about these things because they were spoken about privately one-on-one in the past. And now we're looking at speaking about these topics on an open forum. And I've got to admit to you, even I feel slightly nervous about it, but still excited.
You know, I'm glad that you said that because I have, and I think I've expressed this to you too, my own reservations. Like I wanted to do something, like I guess like this, right? But I didn't necessarily want to. It's catch-22, right? I didn't want to be overly public about it, but yet here we are now, on video and such. But the more that I really digest it, it needs to be done, and I'm at the point like I don't care if somebody believes me or not. That's not what this is about. That's not what this conversation is. This is just
Yeah, I'm just also wanted to touch on the fact that there are now tenured professors at major universities throughout the world who are talking about these topics. And I'm very encouraged by that, about their transparency and openness on the topic. It's a really bold move. Now, at some point, we'll get into who they are and maybe even invite them on the show, which I'd be thrilled with. But one of the earliest that comes to mind for me is Dr. John E. Mack, who was head of psychiatry at Harvard University. Now, that's an important tenure right there. He was talking openly about these topics, going and interviewing people, and you can see some of this on YouTube. And it was bold. And I feel like he opened the door for people in academia to openly talk about it. Just opened the door a little way, and others are now coming through. So I feel like we're on topic with these things we're going to discuss, Mike. We're just not randomly talking about some crazy thing that's going on. It's really hitting the macro consciousness now.
It certainly is, and it's very timely. I think which is also why I'm sort of compelled to even do it. But to what you were saying, that is absolutely true. Some of the biggest universities out there have these scientists or doctors and whatnot coming forth about this topic, and it does take a lot of courage for them to do it. And it's also, when I was talking about the idea of disclosure on a formal level, because in my opinion it's already happened a couple times on an informal level, but nonetheless on a more formal level. Okay, so for me, as a person who has researched and studied this topic from probably at least age 10, and I don't even know why at such a young age I was interested in it, quite frankly, but I was. And just knowing what really is, to then hear, I'm currently enrolled in a course through, it's not a plug, but it is what it is, Ubiquity University, and it's being taught by Daniel Sheehan, who is a constitutional litigator. And when a constitutional litigator who went to Harvard College and Harvard Law School starts talking about the stuff that you and I talk about, and it's being talked about as this is a fact, it hit me like, wow, this is a big deal. And I had already sort of come to the conclusion that it's real, but now that I see what's happening with these, like the folks that you were talking about as well, with major universities coming forward, it's a whole different view on something that I had been looking into, as it were, my entire life. So then I can't imagine if, for all of the millions of people out there who aren't like us, right, who aren't involved in this to the extent that we are, if it hit me that profoundly, what is it going to be like for them? So that's another reason why. The main part of why I really wanted to say all of that was, whose responsibility is it? Okay. This isn't just an America thing. It's not an Australia thing. It's not a European thing. It's a global thing. we don't have a global leader, nor should we. And I don't think that's ever going to happen. Some people feel like a one world government or something. I can't see that ever happening. But point is, whose responsibility is it to make that announcement? I really don't think. I'm an American. I love my country, but I don't think it's the United States' responsibility per se. Even if we were to have like a coordinated effort between all of the world leaders on the same day, like that's what that's what people are sort of thinking that would happen. But it's really more of on a personal level, and on we the people. No matter where you live, your government works for you, right? And I think it's about the people of the world essentially pushing this conversation forward, so that at some point in the near future, the governments can feel comfortable following through and saying, yes, this is correct. But who wants that responsibility?
Well, okay, this is going to lead straight into secret society knowledge. Now, there's always been two groups of people: the people who know and the people who don't. Even Jesus mentions in the gospel that the spiritual leaders have taken the keys of knowledge and hidden them. So he was aware of this kind of duality of knowledge. And that's a whole episode in itself right there, Mike. I won't get into it right now.
I bet. And okay, so here's the thing too. Like, I want to have absolutely a free conversation with you, like free flowing. There's no boundaries per se. But then again, also I'm wondering, okay, with what we're potentially talking about, okay, I'm just gonna. This is what's going through my head right now. We want to go out and we want to interview these spiritual leaders and talk about this conversation. But if we show them a couple of episodes to get used to us, and they hear something that they don't like or it makes them uneasy, are they going to even have the conversation with us? That's what.
Yeah.
When I don't even know. I sure hope so.
I wanted the same thing. We're going to need to have a few episodes done for them to see, well, what is this show that they're talking about, and. But I guess the right people, we're going to find the right people who are open to this conversation, who understand the importance of it, and who have a willingness to discuss it openly. I think they're going to come, and we'll find them. And, we can always video some of the discussion. And if it doesn't go well, then we don't use it. And so
Well, I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to like censor it. Like, if someone's willing to talk with us, unless they specifically say they don't want it to be aired, I want to air. Like, even if somebody says something that I completely disagree with, I still want to put that forth because they took the time and the effort to, offer up their viewpoint on it. Right. I guess what I was saying is that. When you start, and I don't mean to, it's not a laughing matter, but when you're talking about like secret societies and such, it's like, well, that's going to be an instant turnoff for anyone that we're trying to talk to here.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, man. You might be surprised, but I've had some high-level people open up to me about secret societies and their involvement in it. So I've heard some of this pretty close to some sources, pretty close to the top, which I'm never going to betray those confidences. But for my part, I know that kind of thing's real. And I think I've mentioned to you before, the model is basically, if you've seen Star Wars, you've seen what might be described as the positive and the negative side of secret society. So there's one group who want to reveal the truth, and there's one group who want to keep the details to themselves. And you'll see this in the disclosure movement. There's one group that says, let's let them have everything. Let's bring them up to speed. There's another group that says, not on your life. We might give them a little drip feed here and there, but there's no way I'm holding on to this information for my own, edification and my own, improvement potential in a non-spiritual way. So on the Darth Vader side, you've got the entities using knowledge for what might be viewed as a negative outcome. They might view it as positive for themselves, but it's negative for the collective. Then you've got the Jedi who are aware of that, fighting against it and trying to reveal the truth. Now, I know that's a TV show, it's a movie, but it's just an easy fable or mythology to explore a truth.
So that is very much in line with what I was. So I was thinking this morning actually, and I've had this thought numerous times, and it's sort of like with what you just said on disclosure versus not disclosure. You can sort of be boiled down into a battle between good and evil, which then is essentially, the story of the Bible and every religion. So it's just sort of all is interconnected. Like everything is connected.
It's complex though, and this is a layer I'll get into in another show. But even in the even with the Force in Star Wars, they're looking for a way to balance the Force because in this level of reality, we've got a yin yang, we've got a light, a dark, and light. It's like a pool of water. The more you disturb it, the more crazy it gets. Like a pendulum swinging backward and forward. If you can get it to sit and rest in the middle, things aren't so crazy. But while you've got forces fighting, positive and negative, it creates disturbance in the world. You think about wars, right? While there's wars going on, there might be a good side and a bad side, but man, that's destructive. When there's no war occurring, those forces might still be present in the world, but at least for that moment, there's less destruction.
Yeah, that leads right into uh, one of the main um, commonalities, or I don't know if motif would be the right word for this one, but essentially ET's message, as it were, it has a lot to do with stop warring with each other. They're very, very much interested in our nuclear capabilities. They always have been, and the planet is an irreplaceable thing. So, and it's almost like ET doesn't say, quit your job and follow me and drink this Kool-Aid. They're all about just like be a better person. This is the messages that contactees continuously get. Be a better person. Take care of your planet and stop killing each other essentially. And that sounds like a very religious sort of set of ideas, and that makes me really wonder. Like, I have no idea what it is, where it comes from, why it's here, what it's doing, right? But I want to know, just like I think a couple 100 million other people around the world. Certainly don't have all the answers, but it's real. I know that is a fact.
Yeah, well, see, interestingly, and I'm not trying to belittle what's being said here, but even some political groups share that same perspective that the ETs are spreading. So it just helps society function better. Even if you take out the whole religious or spiritual layer and just, imparting it as a way of life, saying, listen, you're going to have a better experience here if you implement these changes, if you disarm, if you stop warring. I mean, it's ironic that we need an ET to come and tell us that. We don't know that already. We haven't learned that in society, but that's okay. So on that level, I like that message from them.
Well, I mean, it's war is a profitable business. That's sort of, at the end of the day, I think what it's really all about all the time. And okay, again, I don't want to like shoot ourselves in the foot here, but before there were governments, there was religion. That was the single controlling entity of the people. And, it's humanity, by and large, just wants to control others. And I just, that's a sort of a foreign concept to me, even though, I live in the same world that everybody else does, right? I see it all day, every day. But like, why do people have the need to, control somebody else by any means? It's really bizarre, and it seems like a immature waste of time. Really, there's so many better things that you could be doing than worrying about how you can be better than somebody else, or whatever the case may be. I don't know. That's not
Well,
coming out correctly.
they're coming from a place of fear and lack, perceived lack. and an egoic perspective. And, these are all the things that we're told to let go of. And not just from Jesus, from other spiritual masters like Buddha, to not be attached to these things. But other people go deeply into attachment obsessively, like people hoarding. I'm not just talking about hoarding, you know, material things, like hoarding ideas, not letting go of trauma from the past. Now, I'm not saying that's an easy thing to let go of, and I've had my own trauma, but I can hold on to those things in my mind and they can shape my experience in the present. I need to find a way to be zen about that and let go of that and heal, actively work on that. And that's what I've been doing. So I'm trying to release my attachment to even previous traumatic experiences.
It's a difficult thing to do, and it's a I think a painful thing to do in a way, and not like physically painful, but mentally and emotionally painful. Because in some ways you have to sort of go through it again before you can release it. But the facing it is perhaps the most difficult part of it, I guess.
Well, I'd say that that's part of ET's message. Like, if we're being told give up on the wars, well, then I'm going to have to give up on all my hatred. I'm being hypothetical here towards, my enemy. And Jesus was telling us to do exactly that. You've heard it say, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say, love your enemy as yourself. That must have been so radical back then. And it still is a radical message. And there are echoes of that in these ET messages. I mean, perhaps they don't go as far as to say, well, from your experience as an investigator, that are the contactees being told you're all one. So when you fight against someone else, you're fighting against yourself?
So I primarily work with people who have seen something as opposed to people who have experienced something. That's a sort of a different group of folks. At some point, I may do the other thing too, but I've heard that concept come through from various contexts. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the world of all this, so by default I do meet and talk with people about it. And one of the new actually just not new one of the ideas that is sort of being put forth is exactly that. Not only are we all one, but everything is made up of the same stuff, right? And what do I mean by that? The microphone that I'm talking into is made up of the same material that my sport coat is. That's made up of the same material that I am, and it's made up as everything. So that's sort of a newer, I guess, concept that's being introduced to the world, as it were, is that this energy that creates the universe is in everything, and everything is all interconnected.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Like, get into the whole quantum physics discussion. And I meant to say earlier, this whole exploration about what is ET brings us into asking, well, who are we? What are we? What are we doing here? And how do they play into this? Who are these external forces? And just to your point about ancient religions, there's another perspective which says that we've always been dealing with these apparently external entities, shadow forces, Jungian shadow aspects, egregores, tulpas. I'll get into the specifics of this in other episodes, but there's a perspective which is these are our creations or miscreations that are coming back to us to be reintegrated, for us to face our own fears.
That's very interesting. I've certainly heard that before as well, and I wonder. So, because I think you basically just talked about reincarnation, and I know that there are religions out there who believe in reincarnation, but I also am pretty sure that, like my religion that I was grown up in, they don't believe in that at all. It's just like you're here for a time being, then you go to heaven or to hell, I guess, right? But my personal belief is that we are all these non-physical beings who temporarily inhabit these physical human bodies, and at some point, when the body is not going to serve us anymore, we've had such a good time here, it's done. We don't die. Our friends and family will miss us because they're gonna miss the physical aspect of it, but we don't actually die. We just go sort of back to that same place that we came from.
Yeah, I'm quite interested in how the near-death experiences might intersect with this whole interdimensional entity ET aspect. I find that very interesting. And I know from reading Terence McKenna's work that some of the mushroom psilocybin type experiences intersect with ET as well. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but people experiencing those realities actually encounter what might be described as grey ETs. In fact, Terence talked about seeing a craft when he was trying that stuff.
I don't think I'm familiar with him specifically. I have heard it generally speaking that, and I don't recommend it at all because it doesn't work as far as I'm concerned. But taking a chemical in order to see an alien is not something I would recommend. It's you put yourself at risk health-wise for like an overdose and such. But
yeah, thank goodness we got a disclaimer at the start of this show, Mike.
What's that?
I'm saying thank goodness we've got a decent disclaimer at the start of this podcast.
Absolutely, we're just talking, not advice. But I certainly don't recommend doing that. I don't know what to think about that one, because you're intentionally altering your brain chemicals. You can't really trust anything that you see or experience in that aspect. Like if you are, because whenever I'm talking to somebody, 99% of the time, they're perfectly sober when this happens. And in fact, I'd have to check sort of the records to confirm, but it's almost like there's just as many, if not more, daytime sightings than there are nighttime sightings, is where I was kind of going with that. But anyway, with the near-death experience, I'm certainly no doctor, my opinion only, but perhaps that always happens when there's something traumatic. Usually there's like some type of accident or operation happening, and I think that perhaps it's just the person is in a situation where for the first time in their life they were able to just sort of disconnect from themselves in an involuntary way, and they essentially go into what some religions might call heaven, and then they go back into their body. I know that there's people out there who can leave their body at will, and describe sort of similar things. So so then that kind of goes back to what are these things? Where are they from? Maybe they're from a different dimension, I guess would be the word, right? Or a different like a different vibration of sorts, which would be a different dimension.
Yeah, well, in some of the encounter experiences I've read and heard of, the realm that the contactee goes into seems more malleable, less fixed, more changeable, more like what I might describe as a dream state, although not to take away from their experience, because often they'll come back and say it's felt more real than what this reality feels. But it seemed to be able to change based on my thoughts, which is certainly how the astral realm works. And some of these plant medicine type encounters are like that too, where our own consciousness is reflected in the reality we're seeing. And the perfect example is a dream state. So if you have a dream at night, who's creating that world that you're inhabiting? Who are all the people, the other characters you interact with in your dream? Well, it's all you. I think that's partly what the dream state is supposed to teach us and inform us about this reality.
That's very interesting. So that sort of makes me want to sort of put forth here that there's so many different aspects to this, and what I mean by that is there are people who are describing things that definitely sound like they would be in the astral realm. And then there's other people who are describing actual physical craft. And, are they one and the same? Are they completely different? That's something we don't really know. It's just not, it's not all one thing or the other. There's so many, as they say, the truth is stranger than fiction, right?
Well, you're right. Some of these propositions aren't mutually exclusive. Like it's like asking, are we physical or are we spiritual? Well, if I was asked that question right now, I'd say we're both. And it seems like I'm not answering the question or avoiding the question, but that's how I see it. I feel like we have a physical aspect. Well, I doubt many people would argue with that. But we also have a spiritual astral aspect. And some of these other religions talk about we're like a Russian doll with different bodies, etheric bodies, emotional body, physical body, astral body. Very interesting topic to explore. And on that, are people having real encounters or not? I find that very interesting because some encounters I've read about or heard about with multiple witnesses, different people see different things, even though they're apparently experiencing the same phenomena. So somehow their mind is filtering what they're seeing or attempting to interpret what they're experiencing and sending their brain a different message. And that's a whole interesting topic right there.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say upon that. I mean, it's something that you can't prove. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. This isn't necessarily my words, right? But I've heard other people sort of talk about this in the ufology world. Do you believe in God? And most often you get yes. Okay. Why? What proof do you have? Show me a picture, a video, something, a conversation. Like there's, see where I'm sort of going with that, right? We actually have more proof and evidence that non-human intelligence, UAP, UFO, ET, aliens, whatever the hell you want to call it. I don't care. It's all the same stuff. Whatever you want to call it. We have more evidence that exists than God itself. And yet I believe in God. But there it is.
That's a great point. That's so interesting. And that shouldn't be ignored. It's interesting just to pose that question to someone. Why? Why do you believe in God? And they can find that very confronting, but it's also very good for them to explore. Okay, yeah, why?
Yeah,
Why?
so
Was that just...
when I've heard that question come out, it usually has to do with somebody at an event or something talking about, being snarky about ET. And it's I mean, in a way, it's kind of like knock down the heckler or whatever, but it's a very legitimate and valid question for everyone, regardless of what your views are on this topic.
Yeah, well, see, right now as a collective, we're going through why do you or do you not believe there are interdimensional or extraterrestrial beings? And we're being presented with evidence, some of it official, from the government, the Pentagon, say, well, we'll tell you why we think it's real. Check this video out and check this testimony from this person. And that kind of stuff's hard to ignore. Now, on one hand, people are asking for, we need it from an official source, otherwise I'm not going to believe it. But there's also some kind of tipping point where I think the collective wants to hear from a few different sources rather than just one. Now, I don't know if, say, for example, the president came out and said, listen, I got news for you. ET's real. Whether everyone would believe it or not, I think there'd be some skepticism. Like, especially these days, Mike, the first thing would be like, I think that was AI generated. Someone's just generated that for some clicks, It's getting impossible.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And I think in that regard, to some extent, people are either going to believe it or not believe it, and there isn't anything that you can do to change your mind either way. So with that said, though, I mean, there's a much smaller percentage of maybe the undecideds, right? But again, to say like why I really wanted to kind of do this is as someone who knows that this is true and was just like hit over the head with a ton of bricks when it sort of became more official. That's how is it going to be like for everybody else who doesn't keep up on this stuff to the extent that you and I do?
I find that fascinating. So there's already been a flip where the people who believed in UFOs and the potential of interdimensional beings or aliens were cuckoo. Now it's kind of the opposite. If you don't believe that or aren't open to that, you're the one who's cuckoo, because there's so much evidence to support it now. And it's often in the newspaper. I'm shocked by how often I see it in there. New research, related exploration on parallel universes. It's like this is normal now. And there's some very big podcasts where a lot of the younger people are following these ideas with amazing frequency. Like I can talk to someone under 30 about some of these topics and like, yeah, I've seen that person. Yeah, I'm familiar with that, researcher. It's fascinating for me because now these people like Jacques Vallée, I'll mention one of them, in people's consciousness in a wide way because they've seen them on some of these other huge podcasts.
Very, very true. It's something it's a lot more open, I think, to being discussed. Believe it or not, we've already been sort of talking for about 57 minutes here, so I'm wondering if maybe we should kind of wrap up this particular episode and then talk about what we're going to do next time. And what I would like to do is delve into with you more about your church and the the openness to this topic and sort of what that all looks like.
It's kind of elusive. They talk about down the rabbit hole. You can see the rabbit up ahead. You get a few glimpses of it. And the further you go down here, the further down the rabbit hole you are. And if you're not careful, you can think, wow, I don't know anything anymore.
Absolutely. There's a sea of information, and that's a good point to make too. Just because one or two things can be rightfully said as being true does not mean that every single thing that's out there is also true.
Mm.
It's very easy to, just like you said, it's very easy to get confused or lost in figuring various things like that out. But with that said, I think that would be a sort of a great sort of wrapping up of our first ever episode. I mean, what do you think? Should we make another one? Are people gonna watch this? Are they gonna like it?
I don't know, but it feels good to put it out there. And just if someone wants to reach out, discuss with us, then we're here to do that without judgment. And like I said earlier, our journeys will be informed by that. So it's a two-way exchange of energy, which I'm privileged to share with you and other people who are potentially going to watch this show.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So I think at this point we should probably say what our next episode is going to be, right? Because we want to bring people back into the show. Because I would consider you a spiritual leader yourself, and this would be potentially a great starting off place to just get used to having the conversation with the spirituality aspect involved.
Okay, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah, I'm 100% open to that.
We can then say, join us next episode where we're going to do a deeper dive into Reverend Stu's church and how that sort of all plays into this topic.
Thank you, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure and very happy and enthusiastic to do this again.
Thank you, Reverend Stu. I do appreciate it and look forward to seeing you again soon. And for all those out there who are listening or watching, tune in next week for that next episode.
Thank you.